What did Ronda Rousey do for MMA?
Everything for women. Dana on record said,
when are we gonna see women in the UFC, man?
Never.
And now Dana goes, Ronda Rousey making me take on female fighting is one of the best decisions I've ever made. All these women have an opportunity because of Ronda. No Ronda Rousey, I don't know if women still today fight in the UFC. That's how important she is.
The roar of the crowd, the flashing lights, the aura of invincibility. For years, Ronda Rousey wasn't just the face of women's MMA, she was the UFC's queen. But behind the highlight reels, the gold belts, and the Hollywood smiles, there was a secret, a scandal so damaging Ronda buried it for years. Now, she's finally telling the world the truth. And it's not just about her downfall, it's about the UFC itself, and the unwritten rules that, according to Ronda, control the entire sport. Before the UFC ever came knocking, Ronda's story had already been written in hardship and resilience. Born in Riverside, California, she grew up in a household where grit wasn't optional. It was part of her DNA. Her mother, Anne Maria Diamars, was the first American woman to win a judo world championship. The mat was Ronda's playground. But life wasn't simple. As a child, she battled a speech impediment that made her a target for ridicule. Even worse, tragedy struck at just 8 years old, when she lost her father. That pain could have broken her. Instead, it became fuel.
This fight is going to happen. And you're not going to say I quit. You're going to scream it when I turn your elbow backward.
By 2008, she had turned that pain into glory, earning a bronze medal at the Beijing Olympics in judo, the first American woman ever to do it. That bronze wasn't just hardware, it was proof she could endure, proof that she was built for more. When Ronda transitioned into MMA, the sport had never seen anyone like her. In Strikeforce, her style was terrifyingly efficient. The armbar became her weapon of choice, snapping fights into submission within seconds. Crowds gasped, opponents tapped, fighters began to fear not just losing, but being humiliated in front of the world. It wasn't just the wins, it was the aura.
I couldn't because, well, first I felt like I had to come back for another fight because I felt like I owed it to the fans, right? And everyone that had believed in me. Maybe I needed to give them an example of overcoming adversity, but it was to the point where the next fight, the first time I got touched, I was out on my feet, you know? And it was so hard because I'd never been faster, never been stronger, never had a better grasp of the game.
Rousey carried herself like someone inevitable, and soon the UFC came calling. This was the same UFC where Dana White had once famously said, "Women will never fight in the UFC." But Rousey changed that. She didn't just become the first female fighter signed, she became the first female champion. Her debut in 2013, a first-round armbar, of course. What followed was one of the most dominant runs in MMA history. 12 straight wins, most inside the first round, many in under a minute. Pay-per-view numbers skyrocketed. Hollywood came calling with film roles. Ronda wasn't just an athlete, she was a cultural phenomenon. But what fans didn't see was the cost. The more Ronda succeeded, the more the UFC invested in her image. Every fight, every promo, every soundbite, it was all meticulously managed. On the outside, it looked like Rousey had everything.
At a level that nobody else could have ever done it. And while she was doing what she was doing, building the sport and the UFC and women, all these other women were training to be her. You know what I mean?
Yes.
She had taken so much on her shoulders at the time, it was literally impossible.
Fame, fortune, and the backing of the most powerful MMA promotion in the world. But behind closed doors, friends and training partners noticed changes. She was more guarded, less joyful in the gym. Burnout was setting in. Her body was breaking down. Torn ligaments, nagging knees, concussion scares. Yet the machine pressed forward. To fans, she was the fearless face of women's MMA. In reality, she was stuck in a cycle where her voice mattered less than the narrative the UFC wanted to sell. Whispers began surfacing. Rumors of disputes over scheduling, media duties, and most importantly, sponsorships. Rousey was fiercely independent. She had her own deals outside the UFC, and she didn't want to be forced into endorsing brands she didn't believe in.
What happened at the end of your match at WrestleMania 35? Becky goes to pin you. It looks like you kick out at 1, but the ref counts 1, 2, 3.
I didn't think my shoulders were flat on the ground, so I was trying to scoot to get my shoulders flat because it's so loud I can't hear anything.
But insiders claim there were unwritten rules in the UFC. If you were at the top, you were expected to fall in line with corporate partnerships. Refusal could mean fewer opportunities, less promotion, or even being sidelined. For years, Ronda maneuvered around this quietly, but after her shocking loss to Holm in 2015, her leverage evaporated. Suddenly, the woman who once called the shots was being handed ultimatums: play ball or risk being frozen out. In 2016, the UFC was sold to WME-IMG for over $4 billion. The priorities shifted overnight. Now, corporate sponsors weren't just partners. They were king. Fighters were told to appear at specific events, endorse specific brands, and avoid statements that could harm sponsor relationships.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey won't be seeing the ring anytime soon, after the WWE suspends her indefinitely for attacking a SummerSlam official. Let's break it down.
My background in dealing in high-pressure situations really helps a lot.
It all went down during the wrestlers' SmackDown women's title match versus Liv Morgan.
For some fighters, it was manageable. For Ronda, it was war. She flat out refused to endorse certain companies, including, according to whispers, a controversial energy drink heavily pushed by UFC executives. Her rejection didn't go unnoticed. Stories began spreading. Whispers in locker rooms of fighters losing opportunities after refusing similar requests. Compliance meant perks, better card placement, pay-per-view points, favorable matchups. Defiance meant punishment, undercard spots, bad press, even contract delays. Ronda for the first time began to see the UFC not just as a promotion, but as a political machine. According to Rousey, the tension boiled over in late 2016. She claims executives presented her with contracts and promotional obligations that crossed a line, endorsements tied to companies she despised.
All right, Ronda Rousey has addressed her future on a potential return to fighting and the UFC, and also addresses a big question a lot of people have had. Will she fight on the White House card? She talked about that too. How there's essentially no way she'll fight on the White House card, even if the UFC offers it up, and if I think she'll ever fight again.
Appearances with figures she didn't want her image linked to. When she refused, the message was blunt. In the UFC, you're either all in or you're out. At the same time, she says she was pressured to downplay serious injuries just to keep events alive. The show must go on, they told her. To Ronda, that wasn't just unethical. It was dangerous. Her long-awaited comeback at UFC 207 against Amanda Nunes was framed as redemption. But Ronda already knew this wasn't just a fight. This was a test of whether she still had value to the UFC machine. The build-up was strange. Promotional materials leaned heavily on Nunes, the defending champ, rather than Rousey. Unusual given Ronda's star power. Rumors spread of disputes over which sponsors would appear on her walkout gear. Then the fight itself. Amanda Nunes demolished Ronda in just 48 seconds. But what shocked her wasn't the loss, it was the UFC's reaction. Instead of protecting their star, the promotion seemed to amplify her downfall, pivoting immediately to their new champion.
I'd never been so much better than everybody else. But your brain doesn't callous. It doesn't heal back stronger after a break. It's just an inevitable decline. And I just couldn't keep fighting at a level anymore. I'd taken punishment and taking punishment until I couldn't take it anymore.
Behind the scenes, she says meetings with Dana White and executives turned hostile. The next contracts offered stricter conditions, scripted interviews, mandatory appearances, corporate talking points. By early 2017, the writing was on the wall. Rousey wasn't being supported. She was being squeezed out. The final straw came when she was allegedly told her next fight would be buried on a card beneath fighters she had once headlined over. To her, that wasn't matchmaking. That was humiliation. I knew right then, she later said. They were done with me. So she walked away quietly. No grand retirement speech. No UFC send-off. She refused to give them the spectacle. For years, Rousey stayed vague. She told interviewers she'd moved on, that she wanted new challenges. But eventually, the truth spilled out. In a candid sit-down, she described what she called the UFC's system of compliance, an unwritten code where fighters were rewarded for silence and punished for resistance. Favorable matchups if you played along. Better pay-per-view points if you kept quiet. Media protection if you endorsed the right brands. But if you pushed back, rankings manipulated, fight opportunities stripped, negative media leaks planted. She also claimed fighter safety was compromised. She says she was once pressured to compete while injured, told directly that pulling out would destroy her career. To her, the UFC didn't just blur the line between sports and business, they erased it. The UFC denied her claims, calling them disappointing. Some fighters backed her up with their own vague stories. Others distanced themselves, unwilling to risk their place. Meanwhile, Rousey moved on to WWE, where she became a wrestling star, and to Hollywood, where she carved out her own lane. But no matter where she went, the shadow of her UFC exit followed her. To some fans, she's a bitter ex-champ who couldn't accept decline. To others, she's a trailblazer who not only broke barriers but exposed the ugly truths of a billion-dollar empire. Her legacy is complicated. She was the UFC's first female champion, the woman who brought women's MMA into the mainstream. But she was also the fighter who, years later, pulled back the curtain. And she left the sport with one final warning. It's not just about fighting, it's about politics. It's about control. And if you're not careful, you'll realize too late that you're the product, not the athlete. So is Ronda Rousey's fall really just about losing 2 fights? Or was it part of something far bigger, a system designed to silence fighters who wouldn't bend? That's the scandal Ronda says forced her out of the UFC, and whether you believe her or not, her story forces us to ask a question that still hangs over the sport today. How much of the UFC's glittering success is built on the silence of its fighters? If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe. See you in the next round.